Hi, good day to you folks. Today I'm going to talk about the path to truth and the path to faith. Um, the first part is going to be an introduction, talking about truth and identifying truth, and then I'll talk about how you can achieve the path of truth, in my opinion. The internet has been a blessing and a curse to society. A blessing because it's a store of information and it's hard to hide something nowadays from the people. And people can easily get together and unite under a cause because of the internet. So it has provided us with speed of information and wealth of information. But it's also been a curse because of the speed of information, now a lot of profanity and immorality can spread really fast. And also, because there's too much information, there's also bad information. There's also untruth. So it's hard to make out what is truth and what is not, especially when some things have a documentary style. So you tend to believe it, you think it's an objective thing. But in fact, in many documentaries, people are paying for this documentary and they expect a certain viewpoint. Even in scientific research, which you expect to be objective, you find out that even in such things, it's been influenced by politics. So the internet has got a lot of information, and some people have become very skeptical about certain things because there's a there's opposing information, you know, contrary information. So people tend to be very skeptical, and this contrary information also seems truthful because of the way it's presented. So how do you sort out this information and find out the truth? There's a lot of groups out there, and they all have their reasons for what they do. Some of them actually believe that what they're doing is the truth. You have the atheists, and they're trying to make every religion look stupid, and they're trying to make it seem like they're the reasonable people because they trust science. And you find out that most of these people don't even know much about science. So the truth about it is, it's easy to follow your desires, and people want to follow their desires. So sometimes you look for something that satisfies those desires so that you can follow it. You do not look for something that is the truth, basically. So you have the groups like the atheists. You also have the group that's becoming popular nowadays, the ancient alien theorists. They believe that you know nature or God or whatever created the different species, but to get to mankind, you know, aliens had to interact. They had to change the DNA of like apes, for example. So maybe God created every other thing, all the millions and billions of species, yet when it comes to man, aliens had to interact and change the DNA to get man. So it's a pretty weird conclusion. And sometimes the way they present this, if you've not looked at other videos that debunk some of their information, you tend to believe it because it's convincing. But sometimes you find out that some of them tell blatant lies. You know, they and you if you're a truthful person, you don't usually think somebody will tell a blatant lie, an outright lie, but they do, well, for whatever reasons. The other group is evangelicals, and for them mostly their attack is on Islam. You know, maybe they believe in what they say, but I think sometimes the idea is, for example, if I believe something is true, uh, and I believe there is a group that's bad, that I can agree that this is definitely a bad group, then if I want people to stay away from that group, sometimes I can tell lies about that group because my aim and my end goal is to keep people away from that group because I know that group is bad. So eventually, ultimately, I'm doing a good thing. But you know, but sometimes even these people don't do much research about Islam before they can make their decisions. And They hear things and they don't investigate it, and then they pass on that information. You find out that even some preachers, because nowadays something that has also become popular with religious groups, evangelicals and Christians, is uh, debugging the prophecies, especially the prophecies of Daniel when it comes to the horns, the beast with the horns. So every one of them have different ideas about what those prophecies mean and explaining those prophecies. And sometimes they try to, you hear some groups tell like blatant lies. I was watching one of these videos one time, and then this man who was going to talk about explain these prophecies, said that in a caliphate, a Muslim government, a Muslim body, a Muslim state, uh, the law is the Sharia. And Sharia just means law. So the law is the legislation of God based on the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet. But what he said was, and in Sharia law, he said this is the law in which the women, the virgins, or the women of the state are supposed to service the jihadis, the people who fight jihad, the military men, when they pass through that town. And he said that's Sharia law. And I'm thinking, I mean, sometimes you hear people just say a jaw dropping moment, and you think, yeah, this is metaphorical, your jaw doesn't actually drop, this is figurative. But when I heard that, my jaw dropped. I was just so surprised that somebody could just tell a blatant lie to people who are trusting him for information. Because if somebody is a preacher and is here to explain prophecy, you have some amount of trust for that person, and you're depending on him for information. So most of the people who are listening to this person, they're not going to investigate. They trust this person to give them the truthful information, because most people don't want to investigate stuff.
Did you know that? We're talking about the caliphate right now. ISIS wants to establish another caliphate. Why? They missed it. It wasn't too long ago they had a caliphate, but it was abolished in 1924. What's a caliphate? It's an Islamic state ruled by a caliph under Sharia law. That's the law that if you're a virgin, you have to serve as military men passing through your town. That's the law. That's Sharia law.
So you have people like that who are spreading willful lies about other groups, and just misleading others. And in Islam, they tell you that it is not for the soul to believe without permission of God. So your role is to tell people the information, tell people the truth. If they see the truth and they're humble, they're not arrogant in their hearts, then it is for God to guide them to the truth. It is not for you to make up information so that to manipulate them and say, oh, they've accepted. Because just because somebody claims we believe doesn't mean they believe. For example, you hear Christians say, for example, the blood of Christ, believe in Jesus as the Lord and Savior. But if you truly believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then how much of what he said, how much of what he taught do you actually follow? Do you even know what he taught? And you find that with some of the Muslims as well, like they keep the beard because it's the way of the Prophet. He kept the beard and his companions did. But you find out that some of them don't even help with housework. There was a picture online, and it was supposed to be comedic. I think it was during Ramadan one time. And this man was sitting on the couch with his legs stretched out, and he was watching TV, remote in the hand. And the woman was in the background, and she had a child on her back, and she was doing laundry. And if I remember correctly, there was something cooking as well. So she had 3 tasks, and this guy was relaxing, just watching TV. So part of the way of the Prophet, following his way, is to actually help with housework. And even the idea of slavery in Islam. People will tell you that Islam meant to eradicate slavery, but that's another topic for some other time. So there are just these groups out there who have their own goals, and they put a lot of information out there, make people skeptical. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be aware that some people are not afraid to tell blatant lies, outright lies to people, misleading them. So how do you sort out the information? It can be very difficult. It's not easy. What Islam tells you is that God sent according to some hadiths, which are the sayings of the Prophet, God sent over 100,000 prophets to the nations, to the people. Uh, so every people at one time had guidance. They had the truth. They had somebody who taught them from God, basically, from the Creator, the one who created all existence. So even when you look at some of the groups that practice polytheism, that practice idolatry or some other form of monotheism, you find out that they have some things, some truths in them. If you look at the Buddhist teachings, you find out that they have good moral teachings. If you look at Zoroastrianism, you find out that there's some aspect of monotheism in it, you know, but then there's also when they talk about, for example, some spirits can be served, like, and you realize that probably they had pure monotheism at one point, but then later it became, it changed a little bit, and this is what happens, and once you understand the role of Satan and some of the devils, then you understand why this is. The moment a prophet is there, already there is an enemy to the prophet, usually an eminent person who doesn't want the status quo to change. And Satan uses that person. And as soon as the prophet leaves, Satan tries to create division in the people. And sometimes the division is because of power. They're like, oh, our tribe is better than your tribe. Who should succeed the prophet? So Satan looks for those divisions, and then they try to bring up differences in the teachings because they want to speculate. Oh, the prophet said this at one time. What did he mean by that? Then somebody explains what he meant, another person explains what he meant, and they come up with differences, and then they divide. They create sects, because of those differences. But if you look at the different religions, you can see similar aspects. You can see some truth in each of them. And this should not be surprising because according to Islam, God sent over 100,000 prophets to the people. So hence you can find some truth in it. So what is truth? The way I see truth is, truth holds true. You're defining it with itself, but here's what I mean. For example, you drop an object on earth, it would always fall downwards. Now, given some restrictions, of course, because if it's too far from the earth, then the earth's gravity cannot act upon it. So, yeah. But within the boundary where the earth's gravity can act upon it, it would fall towards the earth with a certain acceleration, with a certain speed or certain change of speed. Of course, there are going to be forces acting on it, like the wind, which would prevent it, would slow it down. So therefore, a leaf would not fall at the same speed as a stone, a rock, if there is wind acting upon it. But in a vacuum where there is no wind, actually both would fall at the same rate and they would land at the same time if they dropped from the same height at the same time. So you find out that the universe has some laws. There are planets moving in elliptical orbits, and you can come up with formulas based on investigation that this is the formula for this, the forces acting on this object. You can come up with formulas that this is what happens when chemicals act. So this would not change. This would always hold true. And with this information and some of the things you've learned in physics, you can come up with machines. You can come up with cars, refrigerators, and all those things because the laws hold true. So that is truth. Truth does not change and it holds true no matter what. Now, given certain boundaries. So you find out that even the universe is not supposed to last forever. So even the universe as its truth is not going to last forever. It's going to last until when God wants it to last. So truth is held true by the sovereign of the universe, the one who created the laws. So this is what truth is, and truth doesn't change because of your desires. So you find out that sometimes people talk about how, oh, I felt it. I was praying and I was singing and I felt it. Well, of course, if you're singing, songs are meant to affect you. You're going to feel it. And in fact, the devil can use this because it plays to your emotions. And that's why the Muslims don't worship with song. You use your reasoning. Yes, it's going to make a lot of people not flock towards the religion, but it's better to have true faith than to have false faith. So it's not just about what you feel. Sometimes your desires can be misleading, and the devils play to your desires. So the path you follow, the way of life you adopt, should be very important, because this is something that is going to affect your afterlife, something that's going to affect your permanent life. It shouldn't be just something you think is attractive. The Quran warns against something like that. It says, um, "Do not." It says not to be like the people who have taken their religion as play. They've taken it as some entertainment. You see. I'll give you an example of, for example, Rastafarianism. As a black movement, it's important. Talking about blackness, talking about the oppressed, trying to correct history so that people see the truth behind some of these colonizers and these people they praise as explorers, and how they oppress the people for their own worldly gains. But as a religious movement, religions are defined by certain ideologies. For example, in Islam, there are 5 pillars. So basically, 5 things you need to do as a Muslim. You need to pray 5 times a day. You need to give in charity regularly. You need to uh, you need to believe in one God, Islamic monotheism. Uh, you need to fast during the month of Ramadan, and you need to go to the pilgrimage, the Hajj in Mecca, if you can afford it. And then there are also 6 articles of faith in Islam, 6 things you need to believe in to be a Muslim. One, the oneness of God. So in his absolute oneness, his indivisibility. Even the Bible tells you that Jesus said he came from what is whole. So to believe that God is one, absolutely one, without any divisions, like say God is made up of this and that, or this person and that person, that's one. The second thing you need to believe in is the angels of God. Then you need to believe in his messengers, his prophets, all of them, from Adam to the last prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon all of them. You need to also believe in his books, his revelations, the ones before Moses, and the book of Moses, which is the Torah. You need to also believe in the Psalms of David. You need to believe in the Injil, which is the gospel of Jesus, and you need to believe in the Quran. So, and the Quran was sent to make the corrections or the errors that uh, the other books underwent, and to clarify and to confirm the other revelations. But you need to believe that God had sent a lot of revelations before. That's one, his oneness. Two, um, his angels. Three, his messengers. Four, his revelations, his books. Five, you need to believe in the hereafter. You need to believe in the day of resurrection, the day that everybody will be given life again and take into account for their actions in this life. You need to also believe in predestination, in the divine will, which is it entails the fact that God is all knowing. He knows what has passed, what is present, and what will be, everything that will be, and nothing happens except by His will, and His will cannot be acted against. So you need to believe in all those 6 things to be a Muslim. So now, when you look at Rastafarianism, what is the belief as a religion? They believe that Selassie, the Ethiopian, um, he is the second coming of the Christ, the Messiah. Now, you don't even need to sit long and do long investigation to realize that that is not true. He has not fulfilled any of the prophecies that relate to the Messiah. So if you hold such beliefs, just because it's attractive, some people see some aspects of some religions and they say, oh, I like the mysticism of it. Yeah, you can like it, but it doesn't mean you have to follow it. This is something that is going to determine your afterlife. So you have to take it more seriously than just saying, I like the way it sounds. So You find out that Rastafarianism, reggae music is a big part of it as well. And it's attractive, the shout outs, Ja, Rastafari, all that, people get into the hype, and they forget that this is not you don't take your afterlife as a plaything, you go on the path of truth. So truth is supposed to hold truth, whether you like it or not. The truth is not going to change because you don't desire it. Yeah. So how can you tell the truth about certain things? Well, you need to get information. Get information from different sources. You have some things that you know. You're a human being. You've got experience. So, for example, with your experience, you know that a man cannot have two masters. There's going to be some conflict. So, the same thing with the universe. You find out that the universe acts within a certain harmony. The laws hold true always because there's a sovereign who oversees these laws, and there's one master basically. So that makes sense. And God has created us and given us intellect because He's going to question us further take us to account for the intellect He gave us. So with that He's giving us, He's also giving us life experiences that we can tell that one thing makes sense and the other one doesn't make much sense. But some things are harder to see whether they make sense until you have another counter information and you say, oh, okay, now I see that this makes sense and this doesn't make sense. So you have to get information from different sources. And yeah, it's okay to be skeptical, but sometimes you have to remove all the decorations because people are good at speech. Sometimes in a debate, you don't win a debate because you're on the side of truth. Sometimes you can win the debate because you're a good speaker. So you have to get rid of all the decorations, all the things that color the actual arguments, and go to the fundamentals. What are the fundamental teachings? Do they make sense? Because the fundamental teachings should make sense because you've been given intellect, so it should make sense to you. I like to talk about the story of Moses and the magicians because, sometimes people they say, oh, okay, what is the difference between a magic and a miracle? So the story of Moses and the magicians was Moses dropped his rod in front of Pharaoh to give him a sign and a proof that he's actually sent from the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of all creation. So the staff, his stick, turned into a serpent. So Pharaoh saw it, and Pharaoh didn't want his authority challenged, as is the case with all the eminent people. If you're in power and you're arrogant, and somebody comes and says you need to change, you need to reform, you need to act in a different way, you don't want that. And you don't want your power taken, you don't want somebody else to be like, God has chosen Moses, why didn't He choose me? So Moses, the Pharaoh went to the cities. He sent people to the cities to gather magicians so that they could challenge Moses because he said this is a magician. And the Quran tells us that even when the magicians came, Moses told them that what you've brought is just magic. So there's a difference between magic and the miracle. And I had explained this before about what is black magic and how the jinns, the devils, help magicians. And basically, it's a deception, it's a falsehood. So sometimes they make you think you see something. Like some people say, oh, Jesus appeared to me, or somebody appeared to me in a light, And sometimes, if you find out that even when with some drugs, you hallucinate, it's not really there, but it's your mind. So they find a way to deceive the people. And a jinn can do something that he naturally does in his world, like move objects. But you, because you can't see the jinn or the devil, you see it as supernatural. So they can cause the ropes of the magicians and their rods to move and then play with your mind so that you think, oh man, this is actual thing that actually happening and this is an actual snake. But the Quran tells you that when Moses dropped his staff, it consumed basically the falsehood that the magicians brought. So when you look at it figuratively, the Quran also says like we dash the truth upon falsehood and falsehood disappears. because falsehood by nature is bound to depart. Like I said before, truth holds true. So falsehood cannot withstand scrutiny. It cannot stand. Because it doesn't have laws. It doesn't have harmony with the rest of the universe. So when Moses dropped his staff, it a lifeless object actually became a different object with life, a serpent. So once you witness that this is an actual miracle, this is an actual lifeless thing becoming a thing of life. Now, the deception of the magic doesn't work on you anymore because you've seen the truth. You've seen what truth actually is. So the deception of the magic doesn't work anymore. Your eyes have been opened, so to speak. You've been enlightened. So now the tricks of the magicians, devils, becomes worthless. So by that way, figuratively, uh, the miracle that Moses was given from God consumed the falsehood that they had brought forth. So similarly, when you look at the Quran was you look at its arguments. You know, the Quran itself, they tell you that's the miracle. That's the miracle of Islam. The Prophet didn't come with a lot of miracles. He came with a lot of prophecies, unlike what some people try to say online that he didn't have any prophecies. That's not true. He came with a lot of prophecies that have been fulfilled and they're still being fulfilled. But so the Quran basically gives you arguments and it puts forth even some things of scientific truth that you can scrutinize and realize this is the truth. Not like with ancient alien theories where they make up something and they tell you this is what it's meant by that scripture and they could not have known it in that time, you know. But the truth is we do not know uh, how human development worked. It may have been we went up and down, up and down. It's not necessarily a steady growth. So it may have been we had some technology before that would even surpass what we have now, But we know for sure that 1,400 years ago, there were certain things that were not known scientifically when the Prophet of Islam was around and when he taught these things. So it's not like ancient alien scientists where they just theorists where they just make up something and they say, oh, this is what it's meant by that scripture. And, you don't investigate whether that's even what the scripture says and they lie to you. So the Quran gives you arguments and once you see these arguments, you realize this has to be the truth. For example, if somebody tells you this is what the God of the universe, the creator of the universe is like, and then another person tells you this is what it's like, you can be able to tell that, wait a minute, if there is a God of the universe, these are better qualities that he should have than the other thing. So that's the miracle of the Quran. Just like with the Moses, once you see the actual thing, you realize this other thing can't be the truth. So, the Quran, I think also you can look at its reliability. It was revealed in a time and a place where recitation was a big deal, poetry, and there were people who were so good at recitation that they could hear something once and they could remember it and recite it at heart. So, as opposed to other books, the Quran has this liability. Even if you look at, for example, the Bible and the other books that were written, most of them were written years, hundreds of years after the Prophet died. And you find out that especially with the Bible, there are a lot more Gospels. So how is it that they decided that only a certain group of Gospels were fit to be in the canon? So you have that question as well. And why is it that certain things were decided at the Council of Nicaea? What happened to the Nazareans, the first group of Christians, the Jewish Christians? What was their belief? Was their belief similar to the teachings of Paul, the one who claimed to be the one that claimed to say was an apostle, a disciple of Jesus, and he wasn't a disciple? He said he saw the Spirit came to him. So it's about reliability as well, and you have to investigate how the sources came down. What is the history of the sources? What is the history of the teachings? Did the Trinity exist before? When did they decide on the Trinity? Why did they need the Council of Nicaea to decide on the Trinity? So you have to look at all these things objectively and say, this information has come to me more reliably than another source of information. You know, This information can withstand certain arguments. How do you rationalize the Trinity as truth fundamentally? If that's a fundamental part of your religion, it should make sense to you constructively. When the Bible itself tells you that, for example, Jesus said, "The Father is greater than I." Jesus said, I do not do what of my will, but I do the Father's will. So one of these three people is superior to the others. One of these three people knows the hour of judgment, the other doesn't. So one of the three is the actual God. And the Quran tells you that the Christians say uh, Jesus is the Son of Allah. So the Father, is what is the real God, is the Allah. So it's not like Allah is a new God. Allah is just the term for God, and the Arab Christians and the Arab Jews use the word Allah as well. So now, how do you decide? Once you've sought the truth and you've some things make sense to you, you can still have doubt. You're a human being. It makes sense. It's not easy, you know. But so, how do you get to believe? How do you get to actually get the truth? The Quran tells you that it is not for a soul to believe except by permission of its Lord. So do not try to, make up things just so that people accept, you know, because if you have false faith that you reinforce with music and regular recitals of certain words, when the time comes that you're really tested at your core, you're not going to hold on to that faith. You're going to go back to negative things like magic and other things like that, or when the actual test comes of the Dajjal, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, as people call him. How are you going to withstand that if you do not have the protection of God? If God had not granted you faith before, how are you going to resist his his trials? And they tell you that the trials that human beings have gone through since the time of Adam, since the time of the first man, would be nothing, or it would be like up to that time. This trial would surpass all that, and that's why he's not going to last long on the earth. So, you know, you do not just say, I believe just by words. Belief comes through trials, and you strengthen in faith. And it is not for you to say, I believe, but God to say, you have faith. Even another part of the Quran, they were talking about the Bedouins, and the Quran tells the Prophet, he said, tell them, he said, the Bedouins say they believe. He said, but tell them you've not believed because faith has not entered your heart. Rather, say, we have submitted, we have accepted Islam, and maybe God will put faith in your heart later. So, once you recognize the truth, sometimes you have to submit to it. It's easy for us to submit to our desires, and Muslims, people talk about Muslims and they think they this or that. Yeah, it's easy if you're a beautiful person to want to flaunt your hair, to want to flaunt your body, but you practice modesty because truth is better than falsehood, basically. Submitting to your Lord, the Creator, the one who sustains your soul, the one in whose hand is the dominion of all things, submitting to that one is better than submitting to your desires. So you do not do it because it's easy. It's actually hard. But you do it because it's better for you. Because you've recognized the truth that this life is very temporary. It's really short. How long are you going to live? 100 years? And this life is just a test. So you realize that, and you realize that here you're just preparing for your actual life. Your life that is, you might end up with fun and enjoyment that you desire right now, or you might be held to task for the wrongs you did. So you recognize this and you're like, you know what? I've been given beauty, I've been given this, but it doesn't mean I have to come and be a temptation to the world. I have to arouse desires and all that. So, the Zoroastrians have this saying. They say, good thoughts, good words, and good actions. You have to purify your heart. If you realize you're thinking about bad things, you're thinking about sinful things, sinful images, realize that God sees what's in your heart. God sees the subtlest things, and He's subtle to you. So it's not like God is going to come and make something big just so you believe. Like some people say, oh God, show me a sign so I believe. You know, that's strange because that's not how God makes you believe. You know, it's not like he's going to say, here you go, here's a miracle, believe. No, he knows what you're going to believe and what you're not going to believe. And he makes you believe with subtle things so that it grows steadily, you know. So you have to purify your heart. Think good thoughts. Then good words. Do not utter if you know it's easy to get caught up when you're in discussions with friends, you're having fun, to be using profanity, you know, to be talking about women in a misogynistic way, to be to backbite others. You know, it's all they say. Oh, you know, it's nothing harmful. We're not, you know, we're just talking, having fun. You know, we're not. It's not something malicious, but it's actually a big deal in front of God on the scale. Your words. So don't engage in profanity. Don't engage in idle, vain talks. You know, and don't backbite. You know, don't slander. That is even worse when you make lies about people. So these are not good things, and they tell you that sometimes the Quran tells you to fear God, and people think, oh man, the Quran talks a lot about fear, but actually, fear of God is actually a gift. It's hard to fear God. We think it's easy, but it's not easy, and that is determined especially by your environment. If you live in an environment where people embody certain qualities, modesty, restraint, you know, it is nurtured in you, and that's why you find out that when some of these uh, people from conservative countries and especially Arab countries come to the United States, like students, you know, sometimes they're shocked by what they see, but with time, because of the environment, they see it lightly, and they too partake in some things like that. So fear of God is not actually, it's a gift. It's something that's hard to obtain. It takes practice, and it's good for you because yeah, we know God is merciful. He's more loving than anybody, and He created. So if for example you say Jesus or the prophet is loving, well, God is even more loving than them, and He may cause them to be that loving anyway. But God is also just, and God tells you that He's severe in penalty. So they advise you several times, fear God. For example, you tended to take a bribe because things are hard, and God gave you the test to make things hard. And if you pass the test, He might increase you in faith. But in that moment, you don't trust God. You rely on the bribe instead because you forget that God is the provider. So in that moment, you don't fear God. Or you're walking in the street and you know you don't lower your gaze, for example, especially in today's society where people are not dressed appropriately, because it's hard, especially when anywhere you turn there's some trial, there's some temptation, you know but God knows what's in your heart. So the more you engage in a sin thinking this is a small thing, it's not a big deal, the more it becomes a habit. And if you have an addiction towards certain things, then you tend to see them as not a big deal. So for example, sometimes you see Muslims would not eat pork, and because you've not eaten pork for a while and it's easy for you, you see it as a big deal. If somebody gives you pork, you're like, oh no, man, you know. But then they would backbite, which is also really bad, because backbiting has become natural and they engage in it frequently. Face the truth. Don't stop making the excuses. It's wrong. It's wrong. Don't come up with reasons why maybe that was the law previously. For example, if you look at fornication, you'll be like, well, they used to marry early, and nowadays you can consent, and your parents know you're dating that one, so it's different. It's not like you're hiding. You know, but the law has not changed. That's just you making up excuses. The law has not changed, and God has not changed it on the scale of deeds. So, and every sin you engage in, if you do not seek forgiveness for it and repentance and reform, basically a stain is created on your heart. And once that sin encompasses you, and there is no way back, once the law has been fulfilled, the word has come into effect that you are not going to be guided, then it's too late. So you look at Pharaoh and Moses, how many signs were shown to him? He had already done so many bad things, so already he had been encompassed by a lot of sin, you know. So don't engage in certain things. Use your intellect. Know that this is wrong, Let me stay away from it. And so that it doesn't encompass your heart and the word doesn't come into effect for you that you become one of the losers. So good thoughts, good words, and good actions. Stay away from the bad things and realize with your reason that even though I desire this thing, I know that it's not good for me in the long run. For example, alcohol. You can be like, oh well, I'm not harming anybody. I'm not going drunk every day. I drink every now and then, just to a certain level. But there are certain things that when they're in your body, the good angels don't come to you. Angels of mercy don't approach you. And in fact, alcohol is the root of many sinful and immoral things. So as much as you're not engaging in those things, it doesn't mean that it's not a bad thing that you can say, oh, I can drink alcohol as long as I'm not engaging in that. When you're dressed a certain way, angels of mercy don't approach you. So when you dress for the day, look yourself in the mirror. Who am I more pleasing to? Am I more pleasing to God, or am I more pleasing to the devil, to Satan? Who's gonna use me for his will more in the way I'm dressed? But get rid of all those excuses and use your reason and know that even though I desire something and it's hard, I'm going to try to give that up and I'm going to rely upon the one who has control over everything. So you don't have to call him a name, you don't have to call him a father or son. But if you realize, for example, that one God makes more sense as the creator of the universe, then you can say to yourself like this: the one who created all things, the one who sustains all the souls, who sustains everything that exists, the one who above whom there is nobody, so he's the highest. So you can come up with those attributes that make sense, that this can only apply to the one true God who created everything. So then do good deeds. The Quran says something to the effect that if God had noticed good in them, he would have guided them. So have some good in you, good words, good thoughts, good words, and good actions. Give to the poor sometimes. Give with the intention that the one who created everything, the one who can guide you to truth, would guide you because of your good actions. You know, do it with that intention, seeking guidance and seeking the best reward in the afterlife. And then maybe God will make the truth more clear to you, more open to you. So I think that's the path to truth and the path to faith. The path to truth: investigate, use your reason, and the path to and then submit. You don't have to believe immediately. It's God going to give you trials and is going to help you believe with time. And the path to faith: do some good, purify your heart, so that there is some good in you, and because of that good, you're guided. Give charity. Don't be too stingy. If God can provide for you, give, wishing that God guides you and gives you the best reward, and also saying, I'm grateful that I don't have to beg in the street. And if I was going to beg in the street, I would feel ashamed and I would wish somebody would help me. So give being grateful as well, you know. And like I said, you don't have to call him a God. You don't have to say Allah. You don't have to say the Father, the Son. Say the one who created everything, the one who provides for the universe, the one who sustains the universe. These can be attributes we can all agree on, that if there is a God, at least, that has to be the true God. Those have to be true attributes. So I hope this was a little bit enlightening, and I hope we take things seriously and we strive for truth. So good luck in your search. Cheers.